Hey guys, it is Aoife from Fred Weasley Did Laughing, and I am here to do my worst books of the year 2019. So I was originally going to call this disappointing books of the year, and then as I look back at the books that I had chosen, I was like, they're not so much disappointing, they were just fairly bad books. So yeah, I'm going to go straight on into it and tell you about the books I did not enjoy reading this year. So the first book I'm going to talk about is actually one that I'd kind of forgotten I'd read this year because it feels like so long ago that I read this, and that was The Phoenix Empress by Arsenault Rivera. This is the second book in the Tiger's Daughter trilogy, and it is set in this kind of fantasy world. It's very reminiscent of kind of the Imperial Empire kind of in Asia and China, and we are following one girl who is kind of the empress of this land, and then we were also following another girl who was more from a tribe that's very similar to maybe Mongolians at the time. So this one was just really disappointing for me because I'd really enjoyed The Tiger's Daughter, and going into Phoenix Empress I was really excited to see where the story would go. And I just feel like it didn't really go anywhere, and what we got was just really disappointing. I didn't care for the perspectives we were getting in this book. It seemed very drawn out. I felt like I was reading pages and getting nothing vital like information. It was just all flowery descriptions and that was about it, and I just didn't like what some of the characters were doing. I just felt really bored of the story, which you shouldn't be bored of a story that kind of involves people with like fighting demons and, you know, like that are just general badass warriors, a woman trying to control an imperial dynasty. Like, that's supposed to be exciting, and it just kind of wasn't, and I just didn't get the story that I wanted for this one. I didn't like what the characters were doing, and I just came out of it feeling just so put off for it. And I think I had this down as kind of like a 2.5 to 3 stars when I first read it, but since coming out of it I've just been like, no, that was definitely just a 2-star read for me. The next book is Emprah Mammy by Eleanor. This one I was really hoping I would love because obviously this is by an Irish author. It is set in Ireland, and there are parts of this one that I really enjoyed, but overall it's just a book that let me down a lot. This is about a little girl called Jenny who lives with her mum, her dad and her brother, and her brother is autistic and obviously has some difficulties just with day-to-day life and having to deal with those, and Jenny and her mum are very good in knowing what kind of triggers her brother, the best way for him just to get about his day. He's still quite young, so Jenny's mum, we just know, we're kind of getting the story from Jenny's point of view a lot of the time, so we just know her as Mammy, is very much the main person in the household, and the dad has a little bit less patience for the son, and he's just not able to quite deal with that autism diagnosis yet. And then one day Mammy gets really sick. We seem to think that she seems to have had some kind of stroke, and it's kind of an interesting book because we start getting some chapters from the boy's point of view and some chapters from the mam's point of view, and the way they think, because her mam has had a stroke and has difficulty thinking rationally, and just the way her thought process are now because of the stroke as she's healing. Her sentences and her thought process aren't making sense, and it's almost in a way similar to the way the boy is seeing the world. I think his name is Danny, but I can't remember. The way the son is seeing the world as well, and those chapters are very interesting to read, but for me I think they went on too long. I feel like when you're reading chapters that just are just maybe short snippets of things and just like, you know, random thoughts, I feel like you can't read very long chapters that are like that without getting a little bit sick of it. So I think the chapters went on for a little bit too long when it was to do with the son or the mother, just because of the way they think. It was kind of hard to read. And then with Jenny's point of view, her chapters, they were interesting, seeing the granny come in and look after the family. The granny's a great character in this book. She's definitely my favourite character, just a real Irish granny, and I enjoyed seeing that, her come in and Jenny have to have a new, like, develop this kind of new relationship with her gran, where her gran is almost becoming like her mother in a way and looking after her in that sense. But I feel like the story didn't go anywhere. It was kind of like this whole story was just that Mammy was sick and Mammy was needed to get better, but there was nothing else happening. And then Jenny was creating all these kind of lies about friends that she had, and there was we couldn't really see, not really why that was happening, but there was nothing really strong around that kind of plot point that she was doing this. And yeah, there was just some bits of it that just really fell away from me and just felt weak. And yeah, I had high hopes for this because the premise of it is really interesting. We are following a family who are dealing with an autistic child, and it's the hardships that brings, and both the joys and the hardships that brings, and then having to deal with another family who needs to be looked after as well on top of that. So there are parts of this I really liked, but there are parts that I didn't like either, so I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars overall, and I didn't really enjoy it. The next book I'm talking about is also from an Irish author, and it's genuinely the worst book I read this year, but probably the worst book I've read ever, and that is Jacob's Ladder by Charlie Pike. This one was just so awful. It's kind of set in this weird dystopian world. We are following a boy called Leon, who we know is something called an initiate, and this community that he's living in this world where it seems like solar flares are happening in the world, and the world is just not a nice place to live anymore, and the civilization of this world are waiting for this message from some alien civilization, and that will possibly save them. They're waiting for these messages, and Leon is coming up to this point in his life where he is supposed to go on this hunt that's going to make him like a man, or this like a fully formed member of his community, and when he goes to do that, things go wrong, and he ends up in this weird kind of run for survival and run for his own life, and it's just really weird. It's really hard to explain, but the book didn't really make much sense, and one of the worst things about this book was the way all female characters were treated in this book. The only female character we got that had any substance to her was a slave, and was following Leon around for like no reason. She could have just like left him at multiple points in the book, but she stayed with him for some reason, and she isn't even given like her own name. She's given like a fake name in the book, and she doesn't even have that. She doesn't even have her own name, and just the way all the women were in this book was just really problematic for me, and just really cringy, and I hated it so much. Can I talk more about it in my written review that like kind of makes more sense when it's written down, and that I can't really verbalize properly. But this book was just so bad. It just didn't make any sense. Yeah, and just the way the female characters are treated just was horrible. I hated it. So yeah, don't read this book. It was really bad. I gave it 1 out of 5 stars. Race Girl by Leigh Hutton is a book that I should have really enjoyed because it's all about horses, and unfortunately I didn't really enjoy it because for the first 40% of it, all it was about this girl's relationship with a boy that she knew for about 5 seconds, and the book just became all about this relationship that she had when it was supposed to be about her journey to becoming a jockey, even though her dad didn't want her to become a jockey. And it was just so over the top. Like, the drama in this book was just so over the top all the time, and by the time it got to the point where she was actually properly becoming like a jockey and properly in that world of horses and really like starting her career, it was over. Like, we had like, I think in a couple of chapters she'd gone through her whole training, where the first 40% of the book had like focused on one thing really slow paced, and then the bit that I wanted to read was really fast paced. So I was just like, what? This is not what I want. This is not what I came into this book for. And then there was events that happened at the end of this book that were just so ridiculous. Like, so ridiculous. There was like three different things that happened, like one after the other, that was just so ridiculous that just one of them would have sufficed to bring an end to the story, and it was just insane. It was just so stupid. Yeah, I just really didn't enjoy it. I think this one was self-published as well, which is a pity because I would like to like support self-published authors as much as I can, but this book was just not good, so I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. On Beauty by Zadie Smith was one that was just really disappointing for me because I've heard so many great things about Zadie Smith, and I was really hoping I would enjoy her. But unfortunately this book, which is the first book I picked up of hers, I really didn't like. This is by 2 different families. One is in London and one is in America, and we were just following the connections between these 2 characters. We were following one character in particular, the family in America, and we're not really, like, there's not like a real plot to this story. We're just following this family, and we're just following like what crappy people they are. Like, they're just all like shitty people, except the mother. The mother in this book is like the only redeeming person in this book. Everyone else is just a massive arsehole, and I just really didn't enjoy it. I didn't really see the point of the story. I didn't see what I was supposed to be getting from it. Yeah, I really didn't enjoy it. I think if I read Zadie Smith again, I'll have to read White Teeth, which I think I have somewhere on my bookshelves, which is the one that a lot of other people seem to enjoy. This one just wasn't for me at all. Just the style of writing wasn't for me. I know some people really love this and really get a lot out of it, but it just was one that just fell flat for me, and I just didn't get what I was supposed to be seeing in the book. So book I was really disappointed with this year was The Secret Diary of Hendrik Groen, 83¼ years old. This is written under like a pseudonym, so I actually don't know the actual author of this book. This one was one that I just was really like, you're getting a diary from like this OAP who lives in this like retirement village, and I thought it was just going to be kind of funny and sweet and heartwarming, and it was partly that, but also I just found it kind of boring. A lot of his diary entries are talking, it's set in the Netherlands, and he talks a lot about Dutch politics and current affairs, and I just really didn't enjoy that because I didn't really understand what he was talking about, because obviously I know nothing about Dutch politics. So because of that, it fell flat on me, where I'm sure if I was a Dutch reader or someone who was educated on Dutch politics, they might get a lot more out of it. Where for me, I just didn't care about those points. It wasn't as funny as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be funnier than it was. And some things that he said in it, in the main character, Hendrik Groen, I found like slightly racist and uncomfortable. And I'm like, kind of like, I know it might be that he's saying these things because he's old, and like all old people are racist a little bit, but also they're not. Like, not all old people are racist. So yeah, I just didn't really enjoy that, and there were parts of it that just made me kind of uncomfortable and made me cringe a bit. And yeah, I just felt really disappointed because I was hoping I would love it. Another terrible book I read this year was 59 Memory Lane by Celia Anderson. This one was just, I just really didn't enjoy this one. This is one that, like, by the end of the book, I just hated the book, and I hated everyone in the book so much. So this is set in Cornwall, I think, and it is about this woman called May who's like 110 years old, and she basically has this kind of secret to why she's so old and why she's still quite fit, and she ends up getting adopted in this like neighbourhood scheme. She gets adopted by her 85-year-old neighbour. So the 85-year-old neighbour like adopts May as her granny, even though they're both like quite old, and they're kind of like they're kind of like frenemies in a way, like they're kind of rivals, and there's this thing from like years ago that's kind of like continued, which is why they never became proper friends. The 85-year-old Julia, her daughter Emily, ends up coming over because she feels like her granny just needs someone there for her, and she comes over to visit for a while from New York, and she ends up in this kind of romantic relationship with one of the neighbours again, but that who lives beside Julia and May, called Andy, and they kind of start this weird relationship. And it's just kind of like this book about, there's a little bit of magical realism in it about May and why she's able to be so old and still quite so like with it, and then there's just this like romance storyline as well. And the thing with this book is that it had this like really good premise, and then everything just like fell apart. It felt like the author had this thing, she was like, this is what I'm going to write about, and then she started writing with the characters and started bringing all these other things in for these characters, and then she forgot about what she had started to write about in the first place, and it all just like, some things were just like never mentioned again, were like brought up once and then never mentioned again. There was no follow through with a lot of actions from the characters that I really didn't enjoy, because if I see a character start something or take a project on, I kind of want to know what happened with that. Like there's one point where they adopted this this litter of kittens whose mother had died, and then they're like, oh, we'll look after them, and then the kittens are never mentioned again, and I'm like but like what happened to the kittens? I want to know what happened to the kittens, because that's the type of person, that's the type of reader I am. I need to know what happened to these things that the characters took on. The romance in this was so bad. I've never really read a book whose characters were so opposite and were so not good for each other. They just didn't gel. The characters didn't gel. They had no chemistry. It was just friction between them. It was horrible to read. Yet the author insisted on putting these two characters together, and it was so annoying, and I hated it so much. I just really didn't enjoy it. And yeah, there were just like some plot points brought up in this that just like obviously didn't need to be there, or either were brought up and then just dropped and just like never mentioned again. Yeah, romance really, really bad. Just not a well written book that I just didn't really enjoy at all. Imaginary Friend by Chbosky is on this list because I just really didn't enjoy my reading experience of this. I know some people have absolutely loved this book, but for me, I'm not a massive reader of horror, it is something I want to get into more possibly this year, but I definitely found the type of horror I don't think I like to read with Imaginary Friend. Though who knows, in a few years if I read more horror books and have developed my taste more, maybe I could go back to this and I could enjoy it more, or just appreciate more elements that are in this book. But I just didn't enjoy just kind of anything about this book. The only thing I really enjoyed in it was like the mother-son relationship between the characters in it. I really hated the religious undertones in the book. I just am not into that with books in general, and with horror it's just, yeah, I just didn't enjoy it. I just found some parts of this book were like really ridiculous. I didn't find them I didn't find them scary, I just found them stupid. And then I found a lot of the female characters in this book for some reason had like abusive pasts or had like bad things attached to them, and I just didn't find that necessary. Way too long. It was like, what, 600 pages or something like that, or I think it could have even been more. And I just really didn't enjoy that at all. I just thought, like, I was like 40% through and I was like, I feel like this book could finish in the next 100 pages and there's 60% left of it. Every time I thought I'd turned a corner towards the end, there was still like so much left that I just was like, I was so tired, like it was exhausting to read. So yeah, I just really didn't enjoy it, which is a shame, but yeah, oh well. And the last book I want to talk about is The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. I have talked about this book a good bit in the past, but again, this is just one was so disappointing for me because some people who I really love on BookTube had read it and really enjoyed it, and I went into it and I just found it really boring. It is about this like cave expedition on this planet. It's supposed to be real claustrophobic, it's supposed to be a little bit horror, and I didn't find it either of those things. I found it just quite boring. I found like the story kept like looping around. I felt like we got to one point and the character would get back to this point and then she'd go back to this point, and it's just like, it was so irritating. I didn't particularly care for the relationship in this book. There is a female-female relationship in it, which is obviously good to have in a book, but I didn't particularly care about them. I was just like, okay, like they can go on and do that, and I actually didn't really have any feelings about it. I just found it boring and tiring and I just didn't want to read it. I fell asleep reading this book several times, which never happens to me. So I was just so not invested in the story. I will read more by Caitlin Starling because I like the kind of the sci-fi aspect that she had with the planets and with the mining planets and this world that she seems to have created. I did enjoy that, so I will read more of her books, but this one just didn't work for me at all and I just found it really boring. So I think I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. So that are all the books that I just really didn't enjoy reading this year. Please let me know what your most disappointing or the worst books of the year for you were. If you've read any of these books, if you didn't like them or if you liked them. If you have other opinions than me, I would actually really love to know. Please comment down below if you do. And I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.